Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Life is Really Weird, with CiCi Reagan Twining. We talk about loving anything artistic, strange and weird as a child, embracing your differences to stand out, and how much Harley the puppy helps with newsletter viewings.
CiCi is a poet, certified estate planner and American transplant. After losing her mother at a young age to motor neuron disease, she knows the true importance of estate planning. Her goal is that no other families need to experience the additional financial strain hers did during her mum's illness. Through her poetry, she hopes to help inspire others who have struggled with addiction and abuse, and to help them understand that they aren't alone and recovery is possible. She lives in Newcastle with her husband CiCi and Miniature English Bulldog Harley.
So good morning to you, CiCi. Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast. We are delighted to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm good, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
That's good. From your accent, we're guessing you're not from north of the river?
How could you tell? Yeah, I'm from North Carolina in the States.
Brilliant. Well, if we take you back to North Carolina when you were a little girl, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I think I did, yeah. I've always been a writer. I've always written things. I have journals back from when I was super little. When I was 12, I had this Anne of Green Gables journal. I was obsessed with that book when I was a kid. And I had this, and it had prompts and all these beautiful illustrations and stuff like that. And I would write things in there. I remember when I got grounded because I didn't put my laundry away, and I was so upset about it. Wrote about it in my journal. Yeah, so I've always done that, and I've always I guess been drawn to doing creative things. When I was in high school, I always did creative writing classes, and I really just, I don't know, anything that was sort of artistic and strange and weird. I was really drawn to Marilyn Manson and his paintings and stuff that were really strange, and just anything that was a little bit out of the ordinary. I would I'm not super good at painting and stuff like that, but I would do collage. Yeah, so I've always written and enjoyed that sort of expression, mostly poetry and things, but also a little bit changed in my life because I might have done, I don't know, I might have gone to uni or something for that. I'm not totally sure, but my mom got sick with motor neuron disease when I was 14, 15, and that changed a lot of things, obviously. And I went from sort of having a little bit more time or being really close with her to all of a sudden she was sort of in hospital a lot, and she had gotten remarried, and then she got pregnant even though she wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant, and it was really high risk, and then she was in the hospital for months, and obviously I'm just trying to do high school, and that's hard enough. Just being a teenager is fucking horrendous. And then getting off school and then going across the water to the hospital where she was to spend the night with her, to then a few hours that night anyways, to then go back home and go to sleep and then do the whole thing the next day. So then I thought, after what we went through with her, that maybe I would want to be a nurse or something. Because we had a hospice nurse, when she finally was done with all that, she had Vivian, came home. She was in a hospital bed for a couple of years before she finally passed away. And we had nurses who would come to the house and help out once she was that sick. And we had a hospice nurse. I think her name was Linda. It's really hard. That time of my life, I think I've blocked it out. So a lot of it I don't remember. But she was really lovely. And, the nurses would come and help us bathe her and stuff like that. But a lot of times I would do those things or feed her and stuff. And I just thought there was a couple who maybe were not so great. And I was I feel I would be good at this because I've kind of been through it. But then once I had been through it and she had passed away, I was like, I never want to fucking do this again.
Yes.
So, yeah. So then that kind of went off the table. But I always wanted to help people. I always like, when I was like 17, I did like cold calling and stuff. I did like telemarketing and things. And it was supposed to be like, you've won a free vacation, but really it was like a timeshare.
One of those.
Yes. And it was like, and the people who knew, and it was fun if they took it, but the people who didn't and were really excited, like it made me feel like shit. So I couldn't do that anymore. I had to like leave that. And anyways, I had to do things that were like ethical, and mostly I ended up just doing sort of like office management kind of things, like reception stuff. I worked at like a private airport for a little while. I dealt with like rich guys with their own airplanes. So that was like weird. It was interesting for sure, the people that I met. Obama even flew in there once. I didn't get to meet him, but it was cool. And I guess the reason that I never really pursued the writing and stuff more was because like when my mom was sick, I moved in with my boyfriend at the time, who was quite a bit older than me, and ended up that was like a very abusive relationship that I was stuck in for like 7 years. And because of that, I couldn't do the things that like I normally would have wanted to do. So whereas if I had like my own free reign, I probably would have like focused a lot more on like my poetry and whatever. It was like everything I did was like really under a microscope, and I didn't even really have my own friends anymore. And I didn't speak to my family. We didn't speak to each other for a couple of years after my mom passed away. It was all just like such a mess. So I didn't really do any of the things that I wanted to do until I was like 24. And I finally was able to get out. And then I went back into like trying to write and things, and possibly, I don't know, maybe get a different job or do something else. But I was also in active addiction. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. And at the time, I was drinking quite a lot. And when I left my ex, I continued to do the same thing, but just in new and different ways. So whereas like I was never able to really like go out before, like meet friends and stuff, suddenly I'm like, you know, I've been with this guy since I was 17. Now I'm 24. I can go to bars and I can do whatever I want to do, drive around until 3:00 in the morning just because I like hardly slept. I ended up like losing my job. It was really shit. And then I like struggled with my health too. So I moved in with my grandparents, and I just got like another reception thing, another sort of like office thing at like a car dealership in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. And it was all very like boys club. But I started writing again. I was like trying to get sober, and it took me like a year, but I finally did it. And like writing helped me a lot through that. I would like have a panic attack and like write a poem through it about sort of like what it felt like. It's always been like a coping mechanism for me, and it felt really good to get back into it. But then I started doing a long distance thing with my now husband, CiCi. And so I was going like back and forth here to Newcastle, and he would come visit me in Carolina and all of that stuff. So I couldn't really do anything that was super permanent there, because we were sort of in two minds whether I was going to come here to the UK or if he was going to go to North Carolina, or we'd just go somewhere else in the States. But then Trump got elected, so I moved here. Brexit happened, so. But then I sort of fell into estate planning, which is what I do now. I just took a course down in Kenilworth, like outside of Coventry, about like wills and trusts and lasting powers of attorney and stuff like that. And I never would have thought that I would have been interested in financial services, because I'm always like just been like, I'm creative and I like words and whatever, and all that stuff is true. But I found that like I could actually be creative, because you have to sort of, it's very person-centered. You have to listen to people and find out what's going on with them. And then you can like provide them with, well, actually you could do this, this, and this. So it is like it is creative in that way, and it is like really helpful for people and really important. And that tied back in with what we went through with mom, because when she got sick, my parents had just gotten divorced. Like financially, we were really struggling. So she didn't have like life cover. She didn't have a will, didn't have like lasting powers of attorney, nothing. So it was even to the point where like she had to sign documents, but she couldn't hold a pen. So I had to like put the pen in her hand and then like hold her hand and like sign stuff for her. Like these just crazy things that you don't ever think about until you've lived through it.
Mm-hmm.
So it made me really passionate about doing that. And I started doing like admin and estate planning stuff for other financial advisors around here. And then I just decided that if I was going to do it for these other people, then I would just do it for myself. So that's what I've done. And it's great because it's my own thing. So I get to do whatever I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got to do like all the branding and the name and all that stuff. And that was like really fun and like a really great creative outlet. And I do all my like marketing and stuff. So I'm like writing all my copy and things. So it sort of like ties in together.
Mm-hmm.
But recently I started working with a coach, a like business coach. And she was like, you really should like do more with your writing, CiCi, because that's like your deal. It's like your thing. And I was like, yeah. So I've started, I've gotten back into, I was writing a novel when I was like in early sobriety about my life. But it was really, really hard. And I found it quite like triggering. So I had to put it away. But I've picked it back up again now.
Cool.
And I'm recording it and working back like on that again. I've like written a few more things. I'm like journaling a little bit and just sort of like warming myself back up and getting back into it. And it's just nice to work for myself and sort of like have that time to do things and be able to like be creative in different ways. So whereas like it wasn't necessarily what I thought I would be doing when I was like 12 and writing in my Anne of Green Gables journal, you know, I live in Newcastle and like own an estate planning business, and you know what I mean? Like life is really weird, but it all kind of ties together, I think, which has been cool.
I think life is really weird might be the title of this podcast.
I say that all the time. Life is so weird.
I imagine that because of the creativity and the fun and the energy, clients, or do you meet people that say, you're like not what I was expecting for someone who does estate planning?
Yeah. Which is sort of the point. If people want to just like sit across a walnut desk from an old man in a gray suit, then they can absolutely do that. There's a million of those. There's nothing wrong with it. And I felt like when I first started that I had to fit this sort of mold of what people in finance look like. And, you know, people who deal with your money, you want them to sort of like be a certain way or whatever. But I feel like that's quite an archaic idea. And I think in real life, people just want somebody who speaks to them like a human, no matter what business it is, no matter what you're dealing with. Like it's always nice when you go into a shop and the person who works there is nice and talks to you about like your day or your dog or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that you remember. And I used to like go into networking and I wouldn't take my blazer off because I wanted to like keep my tattoos covered up, or like I would tuck in like my septum piercing and stuff like that. And I wasn't upfront about my recovery either, which is fine. That's my business. You don't have to share that, but it's part of like, it's such a big part of who I am. So I decided when I was like, it was like my 4-year sobriety, whatever, which is the beginning of this year. And I put on LinkedIn like a picture of myself and I was like, I'm 4 years sober today. And meh. And it was just like, I'm just going to be honest about it. And so now like, I don't care now, you know, I leave my septum piercing out and my tattoos and whatever. And I just like am who I am. I don't try to pretend to be something different. And I think that no matter what you're doing or who you are, when you're just sort of authentically yourself, that's what draws the right people towards you. So not everybody is going to want to work with me, and that's absolutely fine. But my clients are amazing, and I'll just continue to work with them.
It's good because it's, and in effect, when you think about with marketing or creating a brand, how do you stand out if let's say you were an old man in a grey suit? Very difficult to market that, isn't it?
It's always that kind of, I'm old and white and wise, and you can trust me with your money, and that's my funny deep voice there. So
yeah, very masculine.
My voice is God. No, God's voice is Morgan Freeman.
Oh,
yeah. No question. It is Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman is God. But that's true. I think like if you are sort of, not to say like a dime a dozen, but a little bit, similar in general, it is like more difficult to stand out. But it's been a learning curve of that for me, of sort of merging my brand, so to speak, with myself and posting more pictures of me, or like, I use like Harley, my little puppy, and a lot of my stuff. I send out like newsletters to people. I do like monthly newsletters, and every newsletter has like a Harley update at the end, where I just put in like 6 pictures of my dog, and I'm like, look how cute she is.
That's adorable.
Yeah, and I just like talk about what I've been doing, and people like that. Like people talk to me about my newsletters, like at networking, they'd be like, I love your dog, how's Harley? And I'm like, I never talked to you about Harley, but they know her because of like the emails that I send out and like the pictures and stuff on social media. I've been like doing more lives, and which is kind of weird for me still, but I'm working on it. And just trying to sort of find that common denominator between my brand and myself, because with my writing I'm like very just like raw and real about things, and I don't think that's like super the right way to go with estate planning, but it is still important to be honest about who I am. I don't necessarily need to unload all my trauma in my in my marketing, but I can, I talk about my mom, and I talk about my addiction, and I talk about like my domestic violence that I've been through and all of that stuff. And I, it's just like trying to be the human, the human factor, and not just like brilliant estate planning the brand, but like CiCi the person.
One of the mistakes a lot of new businesses have is this, illusion that you have to be all professional and,
very corporate.
Yeah. And
dry.
Boring, dull.
Because it looks like everyone else.
Yeah. And you do have to be a bit Marmite. So if people, it's like, if it's the same, it's just like, bore off. But if people, you actively go out and know the type of people that you want to attract, and repel is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
which I definitely didn't realize at first.
And then
I didn't
cope with cope with the criticism and the
I didn't know anything about like niching or like creating like disruptive content, like any of that stuff. I was just like, well, if you are over 18 and have a pulse, you need a will. Here I am, and, and it's just like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping some of it sticks. Like it doesn't work. Nobody resonates with that.
If it's cooked enough, yes it will. That used to be our favourite part of cooking when we were little. Can we do this spaghetti thing, Mum?
Is it done?
She was okay with it because there were army houses, so she didn't own them. So.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
Okay.
Moving to the UK, what do you think has been quite a difference to, say, if you'd set up shop in North Carolina?
Well, well, British people are very different than American people.
Yup.
I think everyone knows that. I think the humor is different. I think even sort of like the way funerals are different. Like going to the crematorium for a service is like so gross to me, but that's like normal here. It's like there's loads of differences when it comes to that, just sort of like practical things, I think. I think also I stick out more here because I'm like, the token American or whatever. And like people will watch the things that I put out more because they like to hear me talk. And back home, I'm just like another regular person. So I wouldn't stand out as much. You know, if I'm being totally honest, I think that's me being more memorable, like has helped a lot. I've grown my business completely based on like networking and referrals and stuff. And I don't think like people just refer to me because they remember who I am because I'm an American. That's, you know, that's not what I mean. But I think that I stick out in people's heads a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, you're very different from a normal estate, your standard estate planning human.
Yeah.
And how many Americans we've had on this now? It's like 3.
Good question.
Josh.
Josh.
Lizzie,
yeah. Good question. We'll have to figure that out.
I know. I think you might be our 3rd one. But it might be somebody that we've forgotten, so apologies for that one.
Yeah, you've got to make the most of it. I mean, I would certainly make the most of when I lived in the States of using the English accent. Ham it up as much as possible. Go Hugh Grant. I mean,
yes.
You know, when you've got cold callers just want to stay on the phone with you just to hear your accent, that you know has an effect.
And
so
how would you order a drink in America, James?
Oh, you go into the bar. I always used to like chat with anybody, but could you please pour me 2 of your finest pints of Guinness or something? And they were like, oh my God, you're from England. And then they like reel off a list of things. Can you say like cucumber and shorts? And
Wellington beer.
So it was always good fun. Yeah. So yeah, you've got to use what you have. To stand out. And
it's funny, when I lived in America, they couldn't tell if I was English or Australian, so it's like kind of
just play the role.
Yeah, it's like what do you think I am? It's like Australian. It's like, of course I'm Australian. I love putting shrimps on the barbie.
I was walking Harley yesterday and I met a lady and she asked if I was Irish. So
oh
wow.
I get all kinds of things.
So yeah, you don't sound like you, Geordie.
You are foreign.
Yes. It's really good that you're taking that difference and making it an advantage.
Yeah.
Different is good.
I think you just have to, I mean, I don't know that I've necessarily milked it as much as James did. But I think like you have to use things to your advantage. I mean, I think even being like a woman in financial services is like, you know, there's not very many of us. When I meet another one, I'm like, oh, hello, friend. Let's have a coffee, because it's like, it's just nice to get to know other like women and support, you know, each other. But whatever your differences are, I think you just have to sort of like embrace those and maybe even like crank them up a little bit, because that's how you stand out.
Yeah, totally agree. In terms of what you do then, what do you think? I mean, is it, what I like is, I think my impression is, so I don't have any science to back this up, but things like wills and life insurance, it's things that people don't necessarily want to think about. It's kind of, we're all going to live to be like at least 90. So, you know, I don't need to think about that now.
Yeah.
But quite often life doesn't pan out as we expect. So what I like is that you're taking a fairly dry, it's quite a sad type of thing. You've got to think about what you mean. So if I die before I'm 90, I should have this in place. Absolutely. Should be doing it now. If you've got a family, even more so. Now, what you're doing with the way you operate and come across is you remove some of that sadness and difficult type of conversation. It feels like you make it a bit more fun, a bit more energetic, well, without going too crazy, obviously. But do you know what I mean? It's kind of, it feels like you are able, therefore, it's not too dry. It's kind of something that I feel I can talk to you about this because you're not going to make it too difficult. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I like to use a bit of like morbid humor. I think that like death is like the one thing, I mean, not necessarily the one thing, but like a huge thing that we all have in common anyways. And it is hard to think about. But because I've experienced so much death in my life, I'm able to like relate to people in a different way. So I have clients who like do get quite emotional, and I'm very happy to hold their hand. That's fine. But I do try to, add a bit of like levity to it. Like if it, if we're all gonna die, might as well like joke about it. Have a little bit of fun with it. It's okay. And especially, with like couples and things like that, I like make a joke of killing off one of them, when we're chatting or whatever. Like if it's husband and wife, I usually kill off the husband and say like, right, Michelle, if James died, then what would you want to happen with his stuff? And like, what would you know what I mean? And it's like, obviously it is like difficult to talk about and think about, but if you think about it as just sort of like, if you make it more jokey and more like hypothetical and whatever, then that makes it a bit easier to discuss. And also like, just because we're talking about it now and putting this stuff in place for the just in case doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Like hopefully you write your LPAs and you never ever need to use them. But if you do, then they're there. And by the time you need them, it's too late. So, it's just sort of like preparation for the inevitable, but it doesn't have to be like, so like, so sad and like cut and dry.
Because if you think about it, it's like, it's almost a question of, it gets me thinking of, well, you buy car insurance, don't you? Why is that? It's because if someone rear ends me at a traffic light, I know that covers the cost minus the excess. So I feel comfortable that if someone does that, I'm covered. But I'm hoping it never happens. And it's kind of similar, but just a different way of thinking. Just like travel insurance. Why do you buy travel insurance? Well, if I get sick over there, if I go to the States and I don't have travel insurance,
you're screwed.
A week in hospital, I'll be paying that bill off for the rest of my life. So it's kind of a similar way of looking at it, isn't it? This is for the worst case, which we hope doesn't happen. But if that should mean you feel more comfortable by having done this than actually just saying, well, I don't mind because I'll be dead anyway, and everyone else can deal with it. It's a slightly different way of looking at it. But
yeah, totally. I have, health insurance for my dog.
Yeah.
Like, I hope she doesn't get sick, but if she does or has an accident or anything, then she's protected and so are we. It's the same sort of like principle. And you make a good point where like you're dead anyways, so what's the difference? But that's like another one of my main points is like your LPAs and stuff, those protect you now if you were to lose capacity, whatever, those are for you. But your will is not for you because you are dead anyways. You don't know what happens, it makes no difference. But it's for the people that you leave behind, because if you pass away without a will, it's such a pain in the ass for your family. And you don't want them to be like mourning you and then also like going back and forth to the probate office to try and like settle stuff and like pay things off, or even like getting loans and going into debt to like, because they have to pay your debt before they can pay out any of the things that you've wanted to leave to anybody. And like the court decides where things go, and the court decides like who your kid goes to. It's crazy. So like, yeah, it's not for you, but if there's people that you love and care about, so just make their lives a little bit easier.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's useful.
So this is the quick fire round. James, would you like to take it away?
Question number 1.
I know what the answer is this one now. It's a stupid question, but hey, we'll just go for it anyway.
All right.
What would a mirror opposite of yourself be like?
All right. Yeah. So a numbers person, probably not with a sense of humor. I think a man, probably. Somebody really like preppy, clear cut, clean cut, whatever. Probably old, boring.
Old, boring white dude.
Definitely.
I struggle now when we attend events and conferences. If I don't know, I've got this kind of anti that.
Yeah, same.
If it's pale, male, and stale, I'm like, do I have to?
Yeah, if I'm like attending anything as like a panel and it's all just like cis het white guys, I'm like, yeah, I'm out.
It's a no from me.
Yeah.
Okay, so James is just like dying.
Sorry, James.
That's good.
So, question number 2: what game or movie universe would you most likely like to live in?
Oh, wow. This is one where you're gonna have to cut out. I don't know.
Should I tell you mine for inspiration?
Yeah.
Watch the film The Fifth Element.
Yes.
And as you get that thing, you just put makeup on your face, just use a machine.
Yeah, and you just hit the button and your face is done.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just so cool. But yes, that was mine. But yeah. You can take it if you want to. It's fine. But
no, no, I won't take it.
It's like you definitely don't want to live in the Walking Dead.
No.
Game of Thrones is a bit freaky.
Can't do Game of Thrones. My first thought was the Lord of the Rings, like the elves.
Yes, I could see that.
I got my colour hair as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I would really like to be one of the elves in Lord of the Rings.
Cool. They live forever, so.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to live forever. But other than that,
you'd have to really go outside the elvish community as well, because it'd be really hard to sell somebody wills if they live forever.
Yeah, I think I might just focus on my poetry if I was an elf.
The other option was the one Alan Green suggested, which was, from your new headshots that Alan did, that you'd be Reagan Harley, special investigator.
Oh yeah. Well, that's like a made up one. It's not totally real yet, but y'all are gonna produce it, right?
We've got to put it out into the universe for Netflix to pick it up, or Amazon. You never know.
Yeah.
Apple TV as well.
Apple TV, yeah. Put it out there. Give us a ring.
Special investigator.
Got your Harley Davidson.
I love that.
Harley sat in the basket on the front or something with a little goggles and a leather cap on and a hat as well.
Love it. Let's make it happen.
Could be a success. Where are we? Question 3, is it? Oh, right, yes. Sorry, random thought there. What's the strangest way you've become friends with someone?
Strangest way. Oh, I sat next to somebody on an airplane, and it was my first time like coming over here to the UK. And actually, I knew CiCi online, and he knew my family and stuff. Like he had met my mom before, but I'd never met him in person until I met him at the arrivals gate at Newcastle Airport. So I was a little bit nervous, and I'd never flown on my own before, and I never left the East Coast before. So this poor girl that I sat next to on the plane just had to listen to me vent about all this stuff. And she was like a professor at like a local university and stuff. And we are still friends. She's like married now and has guinea pigs and is tenured and all this stuff. And it's been, years and years. And we're still like very much a part of each other's lives because we just happen to sit next to each other on a plane.
Brilliant. I love those stories.
Yeah.
Okay. So next, it's the question we ask all of our guests. If you could get in a time machine, in the DeLorean, go back to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give to her?
This is a hard one because I go back and forth because of like what was going on with me then. The thing is like I wouldn't like really necessarily want to change anything that happened to me because it brought me to like who I am and where I am, and I quite like myself and I'm happy with my life now, and it's took me a long time to get to that point, like a lot of fucking work to get there. I think I would just tell her that like it gets better and like hold on. Like yeah, because mom was still sick then, and I was like still in an abusive relationship then, and I would continue to be in that relationship for another like few years, but like I said, it made me who I am. I think like I was just so hopeless at that time. And I would just like, I don't know. I think I would just want to give myself a cuddle and say like, be a little bit nicer to yourself and just wait. It's not shit forever. You will get out of this.
Don't stop believing.
Yep.
Good song.
Like, just to end it on a downer.
Yeah.
It's always a good positive. So if somebody would like a different type of conversation in terms of financial planning, what's the best way to find you? Other than on Netflix, obviously, in your TV series.
Yeah, coming soon. If you just go to brilliantestateplanning.com or at Brilliant Estate Planning on social media, you can find me.
Cool.
Great. We've really enjoyed chatting.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, me too.
Give a shout out and a thank you to Alan Green.
Cheers, dude.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Love you the most.
And yeah, we'll...
He's just looking at me like...
I've lost my train of thought. I had something funny to say and then it totally disappeared.
Oh, I haven't enough coffee.
Yeah, time for another coffee, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
We've enjoyed chatting, and we've not actually met you in real life, have we? So eventually it'd be great to...
Once
see
we
you
get
in
off
real
the
life.
Corona coaster.
Yeah. Good way to put it.
Thanks for joining us, CiCi.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You have to edit some shit out of that last bit.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.